The dreams of the early settlers, the Cozads and the Fords, and later inhabitants exemplified by Jephthah Wade, that this little piece of heaven be preserved in its park-like state, has been realized even today, as Cleveland has expanded and threatened to encroach on all sides. It has only been natural then that the natural setting and inviting home to so many cultural and educational institutions has also been a fertile ground for the placement of public works of art. One of the first examples of public art was The Thinker by Auguste Rodin, an early gift to the Cleveland Museum of Art, purchased from the artist and placed outside the museum to give it maximum light. In 1970, it was violently defaced by a bomb planted by someone unknown in what can only be assumed to be a final act in a decade of protest and unrest that marked Cleveland's and many other cities' turbulent 1960s. After much research, the museum decided not to repair the damage, leaving The Thinker, a tribute to rationality and civilization, to ironically remind us of the incident, certainly a low point in the history of University Circle. Joining The Thinker in University Circle and adjoining Rockefeller Park are many other distinguished works of art not found in such large numbers anywhere else in the region. Typically, most of us pass these works of public art without stopping or even looking. So what exactly is public art, and what is its purpose?
It's work created by artists that's outside of the walls of museums and galleries and studios. It's accessible to the public, whether that's in a public building or a public space. So I really think that basically that's probably the most cut and dry answer, and everything else can kind of fit in around that.
There is a tradition, of course, of public art in the Western tradition. And typically in the past it was always sort of memorializing something or celebrating the highest values of the society. And that was always, in a sense, both looking to the past, celebrating ancestors in a sense, or looking to the future, making a statement to last for the ages.
And then I think that all of a sudden we have a new question about what is public space. I mean, you could easily, I think, say at this point, the internet is kind of a public domain, and so artists are doing a lot of things to manipulate that.
The Fine Arts Garden is a good example of kind of a work of public art, in that there is sculpture in the Fine Arts Garden, but it's absolutely part of a continuous fabric.
The garden, as a peaceful and richly adorned public space, attracts visitors from all walks of life for many reasons.
I photograph the behavior of people in civic spaces, and I usually do that from an elevated vantage point so that you can see things relationally. You can see all the individual behaviors of people as they move through and gather within and disperse from a particular space. And public art often acts as a magnet for those kinds of collective behaviors.
I think that there's probably two kind of, at least in my mind, thoughts that sort of differentiate different approaches to public art. One is things that are accessible to the public, meaning that we can see them, we can interact with them, and then there's the involvement of the public in the creation of the artwork.
The John and Mildred Putnam Sculpture Collection, located throughout University Circle, includes over 50 sculptures, many by regional artists, made possible through a generous gift from the Putnam family. The goal of the collection is to enrich the visual and educational environment of the university and its surroundings through an awareness of the diversity and vitality of the work of these artists.
I'm always reluctant to call the Putnam collection even public art. I think of it as a private collection that's accessible to the public. And I'm always very happy to hear from people that are inspired by seeing it. There's so many different types of sculpture represented in the collection, and they're indoors and outdoors, and they're seen by thousands of people every year.
What is created here is more discrete pieces, discrete standing sculpture, which is more traditional in aspect. I'm not saying that's bad, I'm just saying it's still what's happening here.
Yet living harmoniously among the many statues of important and memorable figures are several more abstract, conceptual, and challenging pieces that also attract considerable public attention, interest, and even participation. A prime example is Merging, created by Athena Taka in 1986. Centrally located on an important crossroads site on the South University campus, it commemorates the merging of Mather College for Women, Western Reserve University, and the Case Institute of Technology.
Merging is one of the most successful sculptures in the Putnam collection, and because it's very accessible to people, it's something that you can actually sit on and walk on and touch, and you don't get to have that experience with a lot of art, especially in the art museum. You can touch a lot of the public sculpture out in University Circle, but it's not quite the same as being able to actually sit on it and read a book.
Merging is actually something that is relatively recent. It's something that's underlying, that has come out in her most recent work, where she develops various patterns that then merge together and sort of interact with each other. It's just simply, again, a sort of a celebration of complexity that I personally respond to very much.
And it's a thing to be experienced in kind of an interactive way, and it's also to be experienced as a visual thing across a plaza.
I actually photographed that piece from the second floor balcony of the building that's just behind it in order to view it in relation to the Frank Gehry building, and I was very interested in the formal relationships of all of the straight lines and angles of Athena's piece juxtaposed to all of the curvy, wavy lines of the Gehry building, and how the two sit in a related space.
But the truth is, the Gehry building wasn't there when it was, and yet it still seems to work. I mean, I worked in University Circle when the Gehry building was being built, and that, you know, the piece was still there, and it was still functioning, you know, in its own right at that time. And so I think that the ability of a piece to survive in a changing landscape around it is, in some ways, helps to define its success. So it seems to be, in my mind, actually much more kind of successful than I gave it credit for originally.
Nancy Murniak teaches art at John Hay High School, a public school in University Circle. She's introduced a group of her students to many of the artists and art resources in the area, including the abundant examples of public art, such as Merging.
Their first experience with Merging is more like the experience they'd have with Steggy. Climb on it, fun, this is fun, without really looking at it as a sculpture, but more as a mound to play on. Once you start asking them questions and asking them to be a little more observant, they start noticing all the nuances.
Like, they picked the perfect place to put this piece of structure because it's like in the open, there's a lot of sun out, it's a busy area, as you can tell, many people walk by.
I think this is the definition of public art, because here we have a sculpture that really symbolizes the unity of all these schools, and we as students can interact with it.
I looked at like, oh, that's a nice looking bench, and I just sat on it and like, oh yeah, I know what that is. I know where that's at. And I was like, oh, I didn't ever. It changed my view of what art is, because it made me appreciate art more. It made me realize, like, when people say everything can be art, everything can be art. Like, even though it's just staircase, like it's just rocks stacked on top of each other, it's art.
Beauty really is in the eye of the beholder. And I'm an artist, so like, I usually do sketches of illustrations, and I never really thought that things like this sculpture here would actually be qualified as art.
It really shows our personality through art. People use different talents that they have or gifts to show that we are skillful as a people, as a whole, that we do need each other to make stuff like this. So it's really good that even though one person made this, we all can be affected by this and learn from it.
You really don't get to see their artwork unless you go to a museum, but this is public. Like, we can see it, we can touch it, we can just be involved with it, instead of like having to just see it hanging on a wall and you can't touch it, you can't be a part of it. So
this art piece really resemble or symbolize something like of like rebirth and new creation, new foundation, because like it's built from like one platform all the way to the top of a platform, and it's like overall you get to see all the layers from the top, and then you see the fountain and stuff with the water. So I think it's like just meaning it's something new, something fresh.
To further the feeling of involvement, the students also visited several other examples of public art in the circle, including the statue of Hart Crane by Cleveland sculptor William McVeigh.
There's some parallel between the two. It's that there is this story that's woven into University Circle and the campus that is being told through both of those pieces.
There are night and day differences, but yet it's all sculpture as far as I'm concerned, and it needs to engage people, and they both do in their own unique ways.
We stood there and looked at Hart Crane, and so I started talking to them about Hart Crane and his tragic life.
Hart Crane was from this area. His house was only a few streets away, and he also really associated himself with Case. He studied advertising at Case in the 20s, and he considered this his alma mater and his home, even though he didn't actually spend that much time in Cleveland.
And all of a sudden they start, you know, and they started getting interested, and they're looking at the facial features and stuff and trying to identify him as the man.
This is like a classic, like, you know, a classic style of sculpture, just like somebody's body. But Merging was like, you know, an interactive sculpture that you could sit on, and it was interactive with the community and people. The viewers could like really interact with it. This really, you can't really do anything with it because it's sitting on this high pedestal and it's all the way up there, and it's not really meant to be like interacted with.
Being the fact that this guy died a long time ago, I think that really gives to the skill that was put into this. And it's really good to pay homage to those ancestors that lived and were successful here in Cleveland.
As neighborhoods or cities change, public sculpture either benefits from or can be punished by the changes that happen around it. And I think that is one that has been sort of unfortunately punished by things that have happened. I don't know where it was originally cited. I know that it has moved. It feels lonely to me. You know, it's kind of like a bookend.
Typically, these sorts of works that celebrate an individual and in a very particular place and time have a particular resonance with people who are familiar with a story. And in that sense, to it, I think it really works well.
I now do this kind of work, right? I do figures of people that get placed in public places. And so I think about this, and I know that McVeigh did. He thought about who was this person, what will show in the body gesture, what will show in the character of the face that can link you to the contribution that the man made. So you think about the attitude that you want to give the figure, the stance that it's going to take, and then there are those pure sculptural things that you're doing that no matter who this was, you want to make the sculpture interesting as a piece of sculpture for somebody coming up that has no idea who this is, but is an interesting piece of sculpture. I think this was one of the better ones that McVeigh did.
Perhaps it's not as interactive in a physical way, but it is still a reminder of how much history is really embedded in the visual landscape. You know, we walk around thinking that we are in the here and now, and yet there's so much that we encounter every day that is very much embedded in the past.
And where better to witness Cleveland's past as expressed through the richness of its ethnic and cultural diversity than the cultural gardens that grace Rockefeller Park, as well as several commemorative statues located throughout University Circle. Public art, of course, does not just exist outside in public spaces, but it also adorns the interiors of many buildings and institutions, such as Case Western Reserve University, university hospitals, the Cleveland Clinic, and many others. One exciting collection of art was assembled by the faculty of the Macromolecular Science and Engineering program at Case Western Reserve University. A work by local artist Chris Pico is featured in the program's conference room.
It's a piece Professor Hilton and myself see every day when we meet in here, and it grows and grows and grows, and we receive a lot of compliments, and sometimes they say, "What is it?"
What you do here is work on ideas and look into things and try to come up with solutions and new ways of using materials. So the fragmented thought is here when you're first exploring something, and that fragmented thought then enters into this domain where there are two hands who are working in unison. It's a symbol for cooperation. As more of this investigation takes place, time passes, and these larger circles are symbols of the passage of time. And as that time passes, you're learning more and more about what it is you're exploring, and the language gets stronger. And the final hand here is raised almost like it's stop, you need to go no further. We've reached a conclusion, and the eyes on that hand are symbols of awareness. So I call that last hand the hand of awareness. So finally the thought has gelled, and you have a solid piece of knowledge to work from.
I know very few outstanding works of art that try to describe the creative process like you just did, and also in your beautiful work.
From the Journal of Horatio Ford, quote, "The orchard was the loved outdoor room, ever-changing and ever-friendly, a clover, buttercupped romping place for childhood, a dreaming place for youth, stretched upward in the tall, soft orchard grass."